What's up, everyone? Welcome to the April 12th edition of DraftKings Tournament Plays presented by PrizePicks. I'm your host, Adam Scherer. You can follow me on Twitter at ShipMyMoneyDFS. And as a reminder, you get one free month of Awesemo Plus Platinum when you sign up and make a deposit at PrizePicks. Be sure to use the code Awesemo to receive a 100% first deposit bonus up to $100. We have a little bit bigger MLB slate tonight, 9 games on tap. So starting to get into a somewhat normal schedule as teams have had their home openers, and so we're going to start getting more games at night. Typically, I think makes MLB slates a lot more fun having more games. But just like we did yesterday, going to take a look at 3 of the top tournament stacks on DraftKings and 3 of the top tournament pitchers. Starting with the stacks, number 3, St. Louis Cardinals projected for a 6% chance of being the top stack on DraftKings, 5% aggregate ownership. They have a 5-run implied total against the Kansas City Royals. They're going up against Daniel Lynch, who overall was not very impressive last year. He did make some improvements and pitch a bit better after coming back up from the minor leagues. He started the year with Kansas City, was demoted pretty quickly after being absolutely horrible, came back up. Was a bit better. He is one of their top pitching prospects. So it's not really a walk in the park here for the Cardinals, but still a 5-run implied total, not pulling much ownership. Overall, last season, Lynch allowed a 188 ISO and only struck out 17.8% of right-handed hitters that he faced. Number 2, Toronto Blue Jays also projected for a 6% chance of being the top stack with 5% ownership. They have a 4.6 implied run total facing the Yankees and Nestor Cortez. Cortez was very effective last year against right-handed hitters. He held them to a respectable 165 ISO. He struck out 27%. A lot of what he does relies on deception. His stuff isn't particularly overpowering or particularly good, but he's just a weird dude to face. But there's still massive upside here for the Blue Jays. Since the start of the 2019 season, 7 hitters in the projected lineup for the Blue Jays have an ISO north of 200 against left-handed pitching. There's just no question that this is a team where when they are not going to be particularly popular, they're an advantageous team to get to in tournaments against pretty much everybody, but especially against somebody like Cortez, where, yes, he has put up good numbers and he probably is a decent pitcher, but he's not of the same pedigree as, a true ace or really close to a true ace. So getting to the Blue Jays and all the power in that lineup at low ownership here is pretty appealing. And number 1, the Houston Astros projected for a 9% chance of being the optimal stack, being the top stack with 7% aggregate ownership. They have a 4.9 implied run total going up against Madison Bumgarner in Arizona. Bumgarner had pretty big splits last year between lefties and righties. We're going to get a predominantly right-handed lineup from the Astros, I would assume. The lefties that are going to be in there are just good hitters overall. So that's not, a huge benefit for Bumgarner anyway, or a huge detriment to the Astros, I should say. But against right-handed hitters last year, Bumgarner allowed a 198 ISO and also only struck out 18.7% of hitters. So a pretty big gap between his strikeout percentage against lefties and righties, in addition to giving up a lot of power. And we know that there's a lot of right-handed power in the Astros lineup. Now, going to the pitchers, coming in at number 3, Jesus Lizardo, $7,300 on DraftKings. He has a 13% chance of being a top 2 pitcher. He's projected for about 12% ownership tonight going up against the Los Angeles Angels. The Angels do have a healthy 4.9 implied run total, but Lizardo does have decent strikeout stuff. He struck out 22.5% of hitters last year. He was regarded as a top pitching prospect with Oakland before really struggling in the major leagues last year and being sent to Miami. He did outperform his actual numbers a bit last year. He had a 4.84 xFIP, which certainly isn't great, but it's nearly 2 runs better than his 6.22 ERA. He still has plenty of arm talent, and he's someone that, at a cheap price tag and modest ownership, I don't mind rolling the dice on and hoping you get a good start out of him. Number 2, Yusei Kikuchi, $8,600 price tag, projected for only 5% ownership with a 17% chance of being a top 2 pitcher. He has a very dangerous matchup against the New York Yankees. The Yankees have a 5 implied run total. That shouldn't come as surprising to anybody. This is not a safe matchup. It's not going to make you feel good, but Kikuchi is a pretty good pitcher, and we know that there's going to be ownership on the Yankees because there always is. And Kikuchi has the talent to just have a good start, really regardless of opponent. Overall, last season, he struck out 24.5% of hitters. He had a 3.85 xFIP. And as long as he's not getting much ownership here, I like taking him as a negatively correlated, pretty strong, a strong option against the Yankees in that if he pitches well, the Yankees bats obviously aren't going to do well. And then also you're just getting Kikuchi at low ownership anyway, which is a benefit by itself. And number one, Eric Lauer, $9,100, projected for 20% ownership with a 21% chance of being a top 2 pitcher. He's taking on the Baltimore Orioles tonight in Baltimore. The weather is pretty nice, but keep in mind that all stadiums have humidors now. It's still not hot and humid in Baltimore, so typically the ball doesn't carry as much this time of year. And also Baltimore moved the fence back in left field by a really long distance, like 20 to 30 feet in some spots. So you're just not going to see really cheap home runs hit in Camden Yards, at least by right-handed hitters, which would be the biggest concern for somebody like Lauer. He's pretty much an average pitcher, struck out 23% of hitters last year, 4.29 xFIP, but pretty solid spot against Baltimore, who only has a 4 implied run total. So to recap, the top 3 tournament stacks on DraftKings tonight: number 3, St. Louis Cardinals; number 2, Toronto Blue Jays; number 1, Houston Astros; and the top 3 tournament pitchers: number 3, Jesus Lizardo; number 2, Yusei Kikuchi; and number 1, Eric Lauer.